Welcome, everyone, to the Leadership in Quarters interview series, where leaders come to share their perspectives on different leadership topics. I'm Josh Selden, and today we have Kristine Gentry. A little bit about Kristine. She's the CEO and founder of Culture Grove. She's also the creator of Culture Grove Foundations, a 5-step process to help companies create culture where their employees and businesses thrive. She has a PhD in cultural anthropology, and she's been referred to as the cultural anthropologist. She has over 25 years of experience and has developed award-winning culture change programs. She has worked with companies ranging in size from large, multinational corporations to small, local nonprofits. She has helped improve company culture in a variety of industries, including oil and gas, aviation, healthcare, education, nonprofits, and industrial services. So welcome, Kristine.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited. The thought of anthropology is a pretty interesting topic, so I'd love to jump right in. I feel like the first question to ask with all of this is if you could let us know what anthropology and culture are and how do they really come together into cultural anthropology?
Okay, so anthropology is a social science in the same vein as sociology and psychology, but anthropology is really a broad discipline. We have 4 different subfields, and I think there's a lot of confusion about what we do because it's so much. So anthropology literally means the study of man, and I always add on past, present, and future because one of the subfields of anthropology is archaeology, which is studying past cultures through artifacts and looking at ruins. And then the 2 other subfields are linguistic anthropology, studying language, and physical biological anthropology, which actually studies a lot. It includes forensic anthropology, but it also includes primatology, a lot of different things in that one. And then cultural anthropology is the study of different cultures. And it's the discipline, the piece of anthropology that actually came up with the concept of culture. I think today we talk a lot about culture, and most people don't know that it arose from anthropology and anthropologists. And basically, it came about when anthropologists were going out during colonial times, encountering people of different cultures and being surprised and saying, oh, they don't talk like us, they don't live like us, their whole way of life is different. And what is this? And we've got to learn about these people. So anthropology arose from basically the Europeans going and studying these far off cultures and trying to learn as much as we could about them. And then it's evolved over the time where a lot of anthropologists study our own societies. And we realize we have culture everywhere. All
Right.
of us have culture. And there's so many things that we do that are influenced by our culture, where anthropologists can use their understanding of culture to help solve problems. So now we have like medical anthropology, where we look at different cultures and how, like some cultures, they don't want to take medicines. And you have to convince them of why medicines are important, or maybe how food and diet changes can address issues. There's just a lot of different areas where anthropology is helpful throughout the world and in all of our societies.
So, have you seen, with it being a social science, and I feel like a lot of the examples are very much archaeology and the medical field, and a lot of what I think we would think of as the stereotypical sciences. How do you see cultural anthropology go from more science-based into the workplace?
It's actually in there a lot already that I think most people don't realize. Anytime like now, I think a lot of people are talking about the concept of culture and work,
Right.
and we have some understanding that culture is really important to creating an engaged workforce where people do their best work. There's a lot of studies I think within the past 10 years that are showing how companies that have strong cultures and engaged employees outperform their peers by huge numbers. Some are like 147%, some are 200%. It's a huge impact. Without realizing it, whenever we're talking about culture, we're talking about anthropology. It's a concept that came from anthropology, at least. And then also in cultural anthropology, one of the things that makes it unique from other subfield or disciplines is our research methods. And we founded this research method called ethnography that a lot of people use today in design research, UX designers, UX researchers, even sociology has adopted it. And ethnography is living in and studying the people who you want to know about, basically. And it's about observing how people act, what they do, what they say, and really just getting a real insider's perspective on what's happening. I think in UX research, it's easy to understand. Researchers are watching people as they're using whatever product they're designing and seeing what people do and making changes based on how people react with the product that's being designed. But I use it a lot in studying people. And one of the big things we're looking for is the difference in what people say they do and what they really do.
Hmm,
So cultures always have inconsistencies.
right,
And basically that's because we have our ideal of what we want to do and how we want to be. Like, oh yeah, I work out 5 times a week and I eat my 5 vegetables a day. And then there's the reality of what we really do. And a lot of times we don't meet our ideals, both personally, but also as cultures. A big example that I used to use when I taught anthropology was in the US, we say marriage is forever. Everyone enters a marriage, at least most people do, hoping it's forever, but we
right,
have a 50% divorce rate. So the reality, if someone were to study us, they would say, oh, they don't care about marriage, right? Because
right.
the reality is it's less successful than we want it to be. And we have that a lot in cultures, in work cultures too, where maybe they say, we value safety and we want to make safety the biggest priority. And yet you go and look at how managers are incentivized and safety isn't a part of that. And managers know if we shut down work for today because something isn't safe, I'm going to not make my bonus. That's a company that says they value safety, but they're not doing everything they need to do to really have that value play out throughout the company. So there's a lot of looking for where are those inconsistencies happening so that you can address them and change them, because that really creates disengagement in the workplace. So that's one of the problematic areas that we look for. And the method of ethnography, watching people work, in addition to talking to them about their work, so we do interviews, but also observing what people do, is where we can find those discrepancies a lot of times.
That's so interesting because I feel like as leaders, also having that difference really erodes the trust with our people too. Because if we come up to them and we say, hey, safety or quality or anything that we're saying is our foundation or our priority is the most important thing. And then we go around and say, no, production is the most important, or me getting my bonus is most important. And you got to scratch, it'll heal, no big deal. That completely goes against everything that we've said. So I have to imagine that, again, culturally, go back to culture, that culture of trust and everything that we build just starts to crumble with those kind of situations.
Yeah, I think it can be super detrimental and almost worse than not talking about culture at all. It's worse to be dishonest in what you really value than to just not say anything, because everyone knows what you really value. But if you're
Right.
promoting something different, then it just breaks trust. Yeah, from the customer perspective, if they see you saying one thing, but news comes out that you're doing something different, the public doesn't trust you anymore. There's a lot to need to really live up to what you say your values are, or change your values. Don't say something that is not true.
Now, in these situations you've been in, how has it been, for safety example, where you've been in a culture, in a company, helping them, and you have to call them out on that? You have to say, hey, I hear you're preaching safety, but here's a list of 10 things I've seen that kind of go against that thought process. How do you approach those subjects, and how have they taken that feedback in the past?
That's probably one of the biggest challenges. Nobody likes to get that bad news. And so we try to be delicate and careful about who you talk to about it and with plans to address it. Sometimes CEOs haven't thought through, they're not trying to disincentivize safety, right? They really care about safety, but sometimes it can be as little as saying, hey, you should add something about safety to your bonus structure since you value it. That's
Mhm.
important. Sometimes the problem really comes though in a breakdown between the C-suite may really believe something and they're sure this is what we tell our people. We tell our people every day that safety is important, but that message isn't getting down to the front level employees. There's a breakdown between the C-suite and the management level and then employees. And so when we see that, then it's a conversation of, okay, y'all are talking about all of this. Your managers are not. So now we need some management training about why this is so important and how their role, managers are super important in spreading culture and changing culture. And even we know now impacting employees' mental health. Like there's a
Right.
study that 70% of people say their managers has a greater impact on their mental health than anything else at work. So that manager level is really important. And we've seen a lot of disconnects in that level. I think anyone in the leadership space knows we tend to promote people because they're good at their jobs and they get in a management position. And a lot of times we don't train them in that position. And so then there's problems. And especially if they're not aware of how important culture is and what the cultural practices are. And you actually need to spend the time doing whatever the HR team or whoever your culture team is putting out these things about culture. Some management teams will just skip over that and not do that. We've actually seen that a lot. So then you go back in and there's more training. Yeah, we do have a lot of hard conversations, though, let's say, and nobody likes getting the bad news. So those can be really tough. That's not fun.
I can imagine. So you touched on mental health, and I think that's so important. And I feel like that's in our face the last couple of years, especially since COVID, of how important mental health is. How have you seen mental health impact the employees and the cultures and the companies? And what kind of impact does it have on them choosing companies and choosing to leave or stay?
Yeah, like I said, I think this is a fairly new study that came out that was like the 70% statistic, and it's equal to the impact a manager has is equal to the impact of someone's spouse or partner. It's higher than salaries and work environment and things. We know that managers are really important for mental health. We know that work has a huge impact on people's mental health. And since we went to remote work, a lot of studies and a lot of people said employee satisfaction increased when people were working from home, even though it was such a weird time because a lot of people were depressed for other reasons. But the employee engagement, what people liked working from home. It takes away so much of the stress of commuting and the hours just spent where people feel wasted at work. I just think it's so interesting because there is a lot of data showing that remote work is better for employees' mental health. There's a lot of data showing that employees want remote or hybrid work, and that's their priority. And yet at the same time, we have these big companies coming out with return to work mandates.
Right.
They seem to not care or they care about the results of the study. It's just, to me, it's so interesting. I haven't talked to the leaders who are bringing their employees back, but I would like to because I don't know what they're thinking. Yeah, so we think the statistics and studies show that employees are more concerned about their mental health and they are making decisions about where they're going to work based on mental health. So we know that companies that have more remote workers and hybrid work policies are what the employees want. That's where they can have their pick of employees, right? And the companies that have these return to work mandates, I think they're going to be struggling in recruiting people. I don't think they're going to be getting the best people, which is going to have so much effect, like so many domino effects down the road. They're going to stifle innovation when you don't have high employee engagement. They're going to have more turnover, which is going to cost them more money. There's just so many impacts of having a disengaged workforce on the bottom line and forcing people to come into office for no reason. It creates stress, it creates negativity. I think most people, if they feel like there is a reason to go into work, they're fine with it. But when we have people going to work and sitting in offices doing Zoom meetings all day, it's silly. It's a waste of their time. And we see that. I mean, we know that's happening. Or companies kind of making excuses to come to work. You come in, we're going to give you all pizza and announce the winner to something. That's not a need, really. It's an interesting time we're in. I think employees, people have such an impact. We're focusing on mental health, and some companies really are. And so there's a lot of contrast in what companies are doing. You've got some who seem to not care, and then you have others offering all sorts of mental health benefits now and doing great things. And there's different apps to encourage things like meditation or yoga or taking exercise breaks, different mental health apps that companies are adding as benefits and paying for employees to get and encouraging them to use, which I just think those companies that are doing those kind of things are going to get more people employed, or they're going to have a wider range of people to choose from. They're going to have happier employees. People are going to stay longer. They're going to save money on the turnover and training new employees and all that. It has a huge impact. And the more aware that people are, people today are less willing to just accept these, kind of bad working conditions that we used to have. And we're seeing that with strikes on the auto workers, all these different unions popping up in different places that we didn't have them before. People are more aware that work doesn't have to be the way it has been for the last however many decades.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a focus on that work-life balance, that mental health. And like you said, you can sit in traffic for an hour to then go sit at your desk and sit on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting all day and then drive home. And there goes an extra 2 hours of your life that you're not going to get back.
Demoralizing. Like nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Now, I am somebody who's in a field that it's very difficult to work from home or work remote, but I have always wondered because I read all the different stories. Obviously, I read all I think, what is it, either Amazon, I think just said, hey, we're mandating everybody to come in. Tesla has always been like, hey, everybody should be here. If not, you should go find another job. But I have also read stories about how working remote can impact mental health because it's very difficult to separate work from home when you're always home. How have you seen that? Because I don't have any experience with that, being that I haven't really gotten to do that. Have we found that there is that impact? And is there anything that we're seeing people do to overcome that?
Yeah, I do think and that's a good point. Work from home is not all perfect. There's downsides to that too. And even when it comes to culture, you have to be more intentional in building a strong culture where your employees are going to be connected to each other, to the company. You really have to do things different and make an effort to create that culture when employees are remote. And then, yes, I think people tend to work longer hours and tend to feel like they're always on.
Right.
I know some companies are adopting practices that I think are really great of no emails after whatever the start time is and literally shut it down where emails won't go out. Maybe you could send it, but they won't show up in other people's boxes. I think as leaders, it's important to be aware that I've heard leaders say, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and that's when I work and I send all these emails and texts to my employees and I don't expect them to respond, but they'll see it first thing in the morning. But how many of us as employees, you pick up your phone, you wake up in the middle of the night and you see a message from your boss and you're worried and now you don't sleep because you're wanting to answer this email that your boss thinks is no big deal, take care of it in the morning, but you think, oh gosh, I need to do this. Or even if you don't need to do it, you're thinking about it and you're
Right.
probably not sleeping well. So I think, again, companies have to be really intentional and put in some boundaries. And I think leaders need to be careful of those things. Like even telling your people, don't worry, don't answer till tomorrow isn't helpful if they get it. So I think we all should be on that kind of time release emails where, okay, after 6 or whatever the time is, my emails don't go out. I'm going to set it to go out at the next day. And same with our text messages. I know we're getting technology to be able to do that now too. So I think that's great. And then we have to encourage our employees to stop working and to end their day and take the time off. And I think it's important for leaders to do that as well. And it's easy to not and to take advantage of the fact that they're there and they're going to look at their computer later so we can get more work done. And yeah, I definitely hear a story. I know so many people who say, I used to drive home and I was done, but now I'll come home and when things settle down in the evening, I'll log back on and make sure there's nothing important that I need to take care of. And if they don't mind, if they're taking care of their health and their family and doing all their other things, that's not horrible if it's on them. But as long as it's their decision and not expected of work. And we do have to be careful about the workloads and things like that. And I think it goes back to the managers and leaders really have to know how much work they're giving their employees, how much time it usually takes, and be cautious about workload because it's so hard. When employees are overworked and they're busy, then they don't want to do the things to create culture. They don't want to stop for the fun things. No, I have too much work to do, but
Right.
those things are important to building the team that can work well together and trust each other and help the company go further. I always think about that because I know some people, they hate the culture things. I had this virtual happy hour today and all I want to do is finish my job and relax. I don't want to take this time. And I think if people have too much work on their plate, that time just becomes another hour of their day instead of they can actually end work and relax and enjoy that hour. Then it's hard. It is hard to do the fun culture things and the team building things because people get resentful about, now I'm going to work an hour later today or hour earlier tomorrow. I was actually just talking to someone who I think a lot of people have this situation where you take off work for a day, nobody does your work in that day. So then the rest of your week, you're just behind and busy and
Right.
you have more work to do. So anytime we have people set up to work in those situations where they can't take days off without it hurting them, that's not good.
Hmm.
That's a sign of a culture that has a problem. Like that needs to be addressed. It's far too often.
It does all the time. And I'm a firm believer where I'll give the feedback to my leadership anytime we try to do a team building activity or something that it should be within the workday.
Mhm.
Because for myself, I have two young kids. So I'd rather come home at 5:30 and see my kids before they go to bed as opposed to going out and bowling or having drinks, whatever, till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night and not get to see my family. I don't know why it's not the first thing that we all go to, but the thought is, why don't we just work till 3:30 this day? And that hour and a half we're going to spend after work, let's just have that be till 5 and then everybody can go home. But it doesn't seem to be the first thing everybody thinks of when they set these up. And then, like you said, then people don't want to go do these. And then they're not a team player and they're not viewed as well as other people because they don't want to participate in the culture. But really, we're just working them to death. And the last thing they want to do is go out and spend more time with people from work since that's what they normally do all day.
Yeah, it really is. It's difficult. And creating a really positive work environment, engaged people or engaged culture is difficult because of all this balance. I listened to a podcast the other day where someone said, I really wanted to do like a daily meeting, 15 minutes. My people said, we don't have time for that. So I said, okay, what can I take off your plate that will give you that time? And literally lowered some expectation, changed some things, because he said this meeting is super important to our team, but I need to give the people on my team time to have the meeting. And so he took things away from them. And I was like, that's amazing. We don't hear that enough. It's usually just, we'll figure it out and you must come to this event. I'm totally with you that the culture, team building things really need to be during work hours. It's not fair to ask people to come in later or stay later to have fun when they have other things they need to be doing.
So you did mention something that I absolutely love because it's something a lot of people don't realize is the impact that we as leaders have on others through our actions. And so a little bit ago, you mentioned that we need to encourage our people to stop working all the time and we need to encourage them to go home and enjoy themselves. But when we're the ones sending those emails at midnight and we're the ones that send those emails and those texts at 2 in the morning, even if they don't wake up at the time and even if they don't think about it all night and all that, they're still going to wake up in the morning. They're going to still see the timestamp and see that their leader was working at midnight at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's what they're going to think. And they're going to now have that doubt of, should I be doing that? Is that what's going to make me look successful? And I had a peer a couple of years ago that I've actually had this conversation with because he was very clear with his people about you do not work on your vacations. Your vacation is time for you to unwind and decompress and unplug from work. And then the first thing that he does is work on his vacations and sends emails to all these people he tells that to. And so I know it's difficult sometimes to practice what we preach, but I don't think all the leaders realize that just saying it isn't enough because when we go and our actions are completely against it, it creates that doubt with all of the people that work for us.
Yes, you just shared an inconsistency, right? We say one thing, but we do another. And it's so important for the leaders to model the behavior because they're sending a message. If your boss works on their vacation and they don't ever take a day off, you don't feel that you can do that.
Right.
And no matter what they say, you're still going to feel like you need to be plugged in case something happens. And then we create a whole, world of overworked people who are not engaged and not doing their best work because we don't take time off. There's so many ways that the leaders model things that they don't realize. You said you have young kids. It used to be when I first started my career, we were told don't say anything about having kids or wanting to have kids. Don't mention your family at work at all.
Wow.
And I think that has changed a lot now, which is so good. And part of it is having leaders who have the pictures of their kids. They talk about their kids. They talk about, I am leaving today at even early to go to my kid's little league game or whatever it is. Then your people go, oh, okay, he gets it. Then I can leave for my kids' activity and they won't be upset. But when you have the leaders who never go to their kids' activities, never talk about their families, work all the time, even if they don't intend to, that sets a feeling from the employees of, oh, this is what we have to do. Yeah, I think leaders are viewed as models way more than they realize, and their employees are going to match their behavior or feel like they should match their behavior. And it can create a lot of stress if they don't want to match that.
Yeah. I agree. I interviewed somebody a couple weeks ago and they gave me a quote, and I love the quote. I'd heard it before, and I'm a firm believer in it. And I'm interested to hear if you have any examples of this happening. So the quote is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I love it because it pretty much just says if you don't have a healthy culture, no matter how many plans you make and how great your ideas are, it's not going to happen. Have you seen anything with the work that you've done that a really poor culture or a leadership team not focusing on culture has derailed their progression?
Oh, yeah. Which example should I give? I knew a company that talked a whole lot about culture and their internal culture. It was all external facing, or a lot of times I always use the example of cultures more than ping pong tables because this company had a ping pong table and they did a lot of things, beautiful office. It was a pretty place to work, But there was this mandate that everybody be at work at all hours of the day and stay late and never go home. And we even know, I'll call out Google, when they were building their wonderful campuses. And they, at first, everyone was like, oh, that's so cool. But then the more and more things they started adding, the more it became apparent, like their goal is for people to never go home.
Right.
And I know I read about, it's been a while now, and I haven't seen an update, but Google opened a hotel on the campus of one of their, I think it was in California,
Wow.
and it wasn't free. Like they wanted employees to stay the night there when they were working late, and they were charging them. So
Oh my
people are like,
gosh.
not only do they want me to work late, not go home, but I have to pay Google money to stay late. When it gets to be too much and too obvious that you're providing all this so your people don't leave, I think that's how it backfires. The culture isn't doing so good. And pick on Google, I guess. We know they've done some layoffs where they just emailed people, right?
Right.
Like this company with the best culture, supposedly, and they're treating their people horribly when they laid them off. That is so demoralizing for their employees who are left. And I have talked to employees who work at Google who are like, man, what do you do for our culture now? Like our culture is not the same. And I think it's that they're an interesting one because they started off with such great culture stuff and everyone wanted to be Google.
Right.
And I don't know what's happened along the way. They've made some real bad public decisions that are changing the thought about their culture. But I know smaller companies where culture stuff is very surface. I feel like that happens a lot, very superficial. People will talk about, oh, we have this great office, we have a ping pong table, we do happy hours. I know someone who said, yeah, our culture's fine. We have happy hours once in a while. Like, that's not enough for your culture. And there's a lot of companies, a lot of businesses who say, I just don't have time for that. And when you dig in and say, why not? I'm busy solving this problem. And I go, wait, if you take a step back, those are all related to culture. If you would pause and focus on your culture, you wouldn't have those problems, or at least you'd minimize them. So I think a lot of times leaders, they're so busy putting out fires that they don't even stop to focus on their company strategy, much less the culture strategy. They're just addressing the next fire. But those fires are because you haven't stopped to figure out your culture. I think we see it so many times. People will do their retreats and do a day or however long focusing on their strategy, but they're not going to meet their goals if they haven't created a culture that is going to have engaged employees who want to meet those goals or who know what those goals are. I think a lot of times people create strategies and then they sit in a deck somewhere and people go about their lives, which is the same with culture work too. A lot of people the same will say, oh yeah, we have values. I don't know what they are, but we did that at some point. If nobody knows your values, your company isn't being guided by a clear set of values where people are making decisions and know what they're doing based on those values. Companies that are really successful with their culture, I think, come up with easy values. I'm thinking of Kendra Scott. She talks a lot about culture, and her values are family, faith, and philanthropy. So easy to remember.
Right.
And the family piece, as far as the way she wants her employees to be treated, to treat each other, and to treat the customer, is they're all sisters. She calls it the sister principle. And so everyone knows that internally they're a family, but also your customers who come in, you want to take care of them. If they have a problem, if they're upset, if they're concerned, you treat them like you would a sister. And they have some freedom in the stores. Her employees address customer concerns or issues without having to stop and say, oh, let me go see what my manager says about that. Because she said, if your sister came in, you wouldn't do that. You would
Right.
take care of them. So we take care of everyone the same way. So companies like that make the values clear to understand and people know, okay, I can make this decision to take care of the customer. Like the Ritz-Carlton is known for they do everything for the customer, right? And
Right.
just going above and beyond. And everyone is empowered to take care of the customer's needs. They know they have a budget to go out and get what people want. It's clear. They know what's driving their decisions. And so not all companies, it's going to be about the customer. Maybe it is safety. Maybe it's actually, we really have to save every penny right now because we're struggling. So saving money is going to be important. Whatever it is, you've got to be honest about it. You want all your people to know, because if you haven't been clear and then people don't know, whatever it is, say like companies I've worked in where safety is priority, but the people on the line were like, they don't care about safety. What are you talking about? And I'm going, I was just in a meeting with the whole C-suite talking about how important safety is. So there's a big disconnect here. That's the part where values are important. You need to create them so that people can actually live them. They know what they are, they make decisions by them, and everybody is operating on the same values. But it's not easy. I think all these things, it's easy to talk about, but culture work is hard and it's always ongoing. I think a lot of people don't understand that too. They think, oh yeah, we had a consultant once help with our culture. We're good. But cultures constantly change. And as for so many reasons, as your employees change, as your company, what work you're doing shifts, the broader environments around us impact how we work. It's ongoing change in your culture. And so you have to constantly be adjusting and revising. And I think some of these big companies that are known for their culture, I think maybe that's a problem. They thought, okay, we set all this stuff up, we're great, but maybe it needs to evolve with the world we're in now. I think Google too is doing a lot of return to work, not 100%, but a lot of that where it's just had so many different impacts. I think Google's a whole nother story, just their
Yeah,
size and all these issues of where employees are and what the cities are. I find Google very interesting culturally and as a business.
they are. I love a lot of what you said, but really it's understanding that we have to live our values and that we have to constantly change and we can't just declare victory once and stop. I appreciate all the insights that you gave, and I think culture is extremely important, something that I think a lot of people don't fully take to heart. And so hopefully with this episode, everybody can have an idea of their impact and the impact of culture on their organization. I do want to thank you again for coming here and sharing your expertise. For all the listeners, all of the information for Kristine will be in the descriptions. We'll have her bio, a link to her website, and anything else that we can provide for support there. And anything else that you want to learn from, feel free to contact me at leadingquarters@gmail.com. And obviously the YouTube page where you're listening to this now. But again, Kristine, thank you so much. Really appreciate all your time and all your insights on culture.
Thank you. Thanks. It was fun chatting
Yeah,
about culture with you.
same here.